Thank you, Veronica. Well, tonight we are absolutely in for a treat. And as we say goodbye to the month of June and we're ready for July to move into summer, we welcome Kathy H with us tonight. And quickly, before I turn it over to Kathy, I want to say that the Dropbox is now updated. If anyone checked out the Dropbox in the last couple of weeks, we were waiting to catch up. Now every speaker, including I think this past week's speaker, is there in the chat. You'll see that I put a link to the Dropbox, and then after tonight, in the next few days or week, then Kathy's share will also be on our Dropbox. So without further ado, I want to say welcome, Kathy. You've been here before, and we're just really grateful. And thanks for coming. Kathy,
There, I got it. Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for your invitation to share. I am Kathy, and I'm recovering one day in the Worldwide Fellowship of the Al-Anon Family Groups. And you sent me the link to what was just read, and I downloaded it and read it. And I have read it before. I just kind of, I have read it before, but it's always good to read it again and to hear it again. And for me, as a former high school teacher, I know this is an outside issue, of course, but as a former high school teacher, I used to begin many of my classes in a Catholic high school with the prayer of St. Francis. So, the connection for me is twofold. The other piece is so much, for those of you familiar with our program as well on this side, it's, even though I know this is not really connected to any particular one, but, for us in Al-Anon, this is just something that just my meeting on today, yesterday, last Saturday, it's just always a challenge to detach. It is always a challenge to take a look at those things that can hook me in and to recognize them for being exactly what they are, which are attachments that will only get me in trouble. Particularly last week for me, there are many of us, people that I know, that just, tsunami in our emails for particular reasons. And Al-Anon has taught me the absolute necessity to step back, to step back, to pause, and to recognize, I always say alcoholism is like quicksand, and the family disease is like quicksand, but to be able to recognize those places that will get me in trouble. It's interesting, in one of my meetings, which is a step meeting, happened to be on step 3, and we used this book, Path to Recovery. And I have so much in this book that's highlighted and underlined in this particular chapter, but the one that we read last week, and I don't have it highlighted, it interestingly enough says, and I'm reading it, depending on our higher power can increase our independence from the opinions, needs, and demands of others. We need no longer look outside ourselves to other people for validation. And that, I thought, what? I don't remember reading that before, but it certainly ties in with this, with the emotional sobriety of this letter. So having said that, let me just back up here and just give you a brief background. I did not come from a home where alcoholism was an issue. I just came from a home that happened to be blessed with a mother and a father who adored one another. And so for me growing up, what I received anyway, I came out of a place where I always felt very secure, always felt very loved. And we were always given, a number of decisions that we could make. So I kind of felt a sense of independence as well. I think that we were raised I was raised in really good soil. And, I'm not going to blame anything tonight, certainly on anybody, but I also received 16 years, over 16 years of an education delivered to me by really these wonderful, compassionate nuns. But the message for those nuns was always love and service, doing for others, which, and I've said this before, is not too different. When Dr. Bob was interviewed by someone and they asked him if he could sift down the program of AA into just a few words, what would they be? And he answered, love and service. And when I heard that, I thought, well, that's not really very different from what I learned as a kid. But my issue became really as a young age, and this didn't happen to any of my 5 siblings. I became addicted to approval. I mean, it became important to me to do the right thing, to be, I never thought of myself as a perfectionist, but certainly I wanted to be the perfect friend. I wanted to be there for you. Just this last week, the topic of alcohol came up in my Al-Anon meeting. And it was really, when I shared, I said, it's important because all of us have had to take a look at our own relationship with alcohol. My relationship with it is such that I might have a glass of wine, but I would never have more alcohol that would keep me not being alert to your needs. I mean, it's just kind of and that's of course why I ended up where I am, because it's this idea that I know what's best for you, that I will be there for you. And it just is such an attachment emotionally that it can cause emotional as well as spiritual trouble. I mean, it's danger with a capital D. So when I began to date my future husband, what I noticed about him, I mean, he just had all these wonderful qualities, but what stuck out for me was the anger. I mean, he would become angry over things that, from my judgment, didn't really call for that kind of anger. But the other thing was he would become angry. You just never knew when he was going to blow. And so I immediately took on, of course, this job, not realizing at that time, anger always seeks a target. And so, I thought it was my job to tamp down his anger, to keep myself from being the target, to keep you from being a target. And so when it comes to this idea of attachments, it's certainly, cropped up for me to become attached to this version of myself, of being, a crusader, of being the one who would understand him like no one else could, of being there for him. Somewhere along the line, I got the idea that accepting unacceptable behavior was somehow noble. And it wasn't until I got to Al-Anon that I really had to, as many of us do, I had to unlearn. It's not like I had to learn new things. It was more of unlearning old things or messages and ideas that I was from which I was operating. So my husband, when I met him, he was in the Marines. I was just finishing up college. I went to Chicago to teach. He was stationed at that time eventually was stationed in Cherry Point, North Carolina. And when I came home for Christmas of my first year of teaching, he also came back to, we're both Cincinnatians. We both came back to Cincinnati for Christmas. And he made this announcement at the dinner table that we were getting married in front. I mean, it was his family's Christmas dinner. And I hadn't realized that was going to happen. But I am the kind that would think, oh my God, what will that look like? What will that look like if I say suddenly, well, now, wait a minute, we really haven't discussed this. I'm still under contract. You've got Vietnam. I'm not sure that this is something that we can, that you can just announce on the spur of the moment. But I didn't say any of those things. And that's important, because I didn't say any of those things because of this fear of how that would look in front of his family. It would just, if I all of a sudden confronted him or disagreed with him. So what I did was what I learned to do from there on in until I found Al-Anon, and that was just simply to turn over the responsibility for me to somebody else. Because if I do that, if I give you responsibility for decisions in my life and everything goes haywire, well, it's not my fault. I mean, you're the one that made that decision. And it's just a way of dodging growing up. I think it's just a way of dodging growing up. And I still today really believe that recovery, it does not take place in meetings. I go to a meeting to hear about the hope of recovery. I go to meetings to hear how you practice the principles of the program in your life. But then I have to take that outside of the meeting. And that's really where my emotional and spiritual growth occurs. I often say, Al-Anon is not my whole life, but it allows me to lead a life that is whole. And that's the critical piece for me. So what I did actually once, I mean, I knew 10 days within, when we were 10 days within our marriage, that I was in over my head, that I was in a situation for which I had no tools. I had no, I never recognized what was going on. So what I did was, I waited for somebody to be different, and holding on to those old ideas, that's what made me just so sick. I'll just jump into this aside. With the pandemic, but when the pandemic first started, I'm a swimmer. So I go to the Y early in the morning and swim. But once the pandemic hit, the pool got crowded, because that was one place people could go and feel safe, I think, was swimming. So the pool was already open. So one day, as I'm swimming early in the morning, I noticed there's this woman I've never seen before, and she's in the lane next to me. And I don't think I was trying to race her, but maybe I was. Anyway, she's a really big woman, and I'm just swimming along my pace, and I noticed that she's just whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. I mean, she's beating me, by a lot. So I thought, wow, what stroke is she using? Allows her to go so quickly. So I pulled over to my side of the lane, and I looked, and she had flippers on, and I thought, flippers. That's the secret. And, it reminded me of recovery, in that my work is still my work. I still have to do what I need to do to recover. But having a 12-step program, having the traditions, having the principles that this program offers us, certainly allows me to glide through life a lot smoother, a lot easier than I did without it. Would I have been okay without Al-Anon? I don't know, maybe, but it certainly wouldn't be the life that I have today. It would not be the spiritual or emotional life that I would have today, because I would be so into anger, resentment, judging, blaming, criticizing, all those things that just simply take up all my energy. I just said it tonight to a gal that called me. Alcoholism is like quicksand. I get close to it, thinking that I can fix it, that I can be this for you, that I can lead you to recovery. And the next thing, it's just like the old Tarzan movies. The next thing I know, I'm up to my neck, fighting for my breath. That's the place that Al-Anon takes me. So, my husband, shortly after we were married, actually, very shortly after we were married, left for Vietnam. And I came back to Cincinnati, and the whole time he was gone, he comes from a big family as well. And I'm very close to his sisters. Actually, we have big sisters lunch tomorrow, but I'm very close to his sisters. And we just spent all that time talking about him. What's wrong with him? Why would he do this? Why would he say this? Why? I mean, always the focus is never on me. The focus is always on somebody else. And that just that got me nowhere quickly. So anyhow, quickly he comes back from Vietnam, decides to become a dentist using the GI Bill. We go to Ohio State, becomes a dentist, comes back. Everything falls apart. Things in Columbus seemed to be going okay because he quit drinking. He was beaten up badly before we left for Columbus in a bar. So he gave up the drink. And boy, things just were moving along. Come back to Cincinnati, and everything fell apart again. In a nutshell, he now, because he's a dentist, could write himself prescriptions, and eventually was, busted for that, thrown out of dentistry. And then what happened was he became unemployed. So I'm living now with a, Marine fighter pilot, not fighter pilot, a Marine jet pilot, a dentist who is now unemployed. We have a house full of kids. My focus is not on him. My focus is on everybody else, and what will people think if they know what's going on here? Nobody knew he was thrown out of dentistry. I created the story about his being such a Renaissance man, that dentistry was too boring for him, and now he had created this huge vegetable garden, and he was he was raising bees, and I just spun this tale. Why? Because I didn't want anyone to know what I was living with. I didn't want anyone to know what I was living with. And so I worked very hard at creating a story that I could sell. I should have been in public relations. But anyway, I made it sound like this was just the kind of life I always wanted, where in truth, I was terribly frightened. In truth, I was just, we have this adjective that's in our opening. I was bewildered. I was just completely bewildered, and just simply didn't, I just didn't have any idea how this was going to get fixed. Very quickly, how it got fixed was this. One of the sisters, one of my husband's sisters, joined AA. And then another sister-in-law joined A, and then another sister-in-law joined A. And pretty soon I've got 4 sister-in-laws who are in Alcoholics Anonymous, and still are to this day. And what I noticed about them is they were becoming different. I mean, they were the same. It was as though they were going through life with flippers on. They were relaxed. It just seemed to be tethered, whereas before I had never noticed that. And so, they would speak a lot about their recovery, and I always felt like they were coming for me, and in a sense they were. They would talk about alcoholism being a family disease and how it had been in the family for a long time. And, I guess I knew that, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to do anything more. I mean, I had already been over those 12 and a half years to social workers, to, priests, to psychologists. I mean, I'd been reading about whatever this was going on. I was just pretty much done with it. But when they talked about alcoholism being a family disease, I was pregnant at this time with our child number 7. And I thought, oh my God, if this is truly a family disease, I'm never, ever going to get away from it. Never. And so I went to my first Al-Anon meeting. But again, because of this attachment to how things would look, because of this attachment that I had to this sense of myself that I could handle anything, I made sure I went to a meeting where I would know no one, where no one would know me. And it was there. You know, it was there in the meeting, that a beginner's meeting, that this woman, her name was Ruth, and I certainly can't believe she's alive today. But that's where she said, you know, this really, you know, if your husband is alcoholic or not alcoholic, it's not really it's not your call. Does your husband's drinking, does it cause a problem in your life? And I said, every time he drinks, it's a problem. And she said, well, then you're in the right place, because this program is for you. And that night, April 5th, 1982, that's when things really changed for me, because now you're telling me that my recovery is about me, regardless of what anybody else in my life is doing. I have to now become responsible for my recovery from the family disease of alcoholism. It's up, you know, I have to start paying attention to how I have been damaged by the disease, And you know, we say in Al-Anon, it's not a passive program. I mean, it's not a passive program. We have our 3 A's: awareness, acceptance, and action. And the action, of course, sometimes gets left out, but there is an understanding there that those 3 A's are important for us. But I think the biggest thing is, for me, I can't then, and I can't now wait for other people to be different. I have to be willing to grow in this program, spiritually and emotionally. And so that's, you know, that's one of the great, you know, gifts of Al-Anon, is to learn to rely on the wisdom of the group, you know, to listen to people's experience, to listen to their, you know, how they're practicing these principles in this program. But, you know, I mentioned earlier, what strikes me about Al-Anon, and has always, it's really based and rooted in this spirituality of letting go. It just seems to me that I am constantly being invited to let go of my ideas about how I think life should be, to let go of my ideas of how I think your life should be, and to really live life with open hands. It's in Al-Anon that I learned, you know, this idea of failure being the beginning of wisdom. You know, that we were all there because all of our efforts failed miserably. And so, you know, things like, there's a quote that we have, and I use it all the time in our literature, that it's from Thomas Merton, and it says, the beginning of love is to allow those we love to be themselves perfectly. That's important. It's also important when I apply that to myself, when I recognize that, you know, one day at a time, I think I move forward. There are days when I go back, certainly, but to remember, you know, not to let the perfect get in the way of the good, not to let the perfect get in the way of the good. And so I think for me, you know, the idea of choice is important in a program of recovery. Knowing that, you know, I do not have to become, I don't have to step into that quicksand. I can take care of myself. I can choose not to participate in insanity. I can back away from chaos. And it's not, you know, particularly this has been coming up for a number of us recently. It's not that we live our lives with our head in the sand, but it's that with a program of recovery, particularly when you're talking about emotional sobriety, I think that we make decisions about where we want to focus our energy. I don't want to focus my energy on, you know, hollering and screaming and trying to convince you of the errors of your way. It's just, to me, you know, it's just not, it's not productive, and it doesn't do me any good. We talk about, one time when I was in the Al-Anon conference, I saw this bumper sticker that said, detach, don't amputate. And so I think that my recovery gives me a way to live a balanced life of paying attention and yet not getting swallowed up, of being compassionate and yet still being able to take care of my own emotional and spiritual health. There are a number of people that will say, well, I know in your program, you're not allowed to say, I don't know where people make this stuff up. There's nothing in any of our literature that is about censorship. I can, I can share what works and what doesn't work in my own life, but this is just something I think that we all have to get to it on our own. Sometimes we just have to. My sponsor has said to me over the years, let God sort it out. Let God sort it out. I don't have to figure all these things out. It would just make me crazy. Anyway, so now I'm in this program, and this focus now is shifted to me, and I'm being taught these wonderful things about letting go and letting God, about turning my life and will over to the care of God, the God of my experience, and beginning to believe that I really am enough. I'm enough for today. Someone shared just this past week an old thing. I haven't heard it in a long time. I am enough. I have enough. I do enough. I mean, for many of us, that's an important mantra, to be willing to accept ourselves as we are and to know that, we're okay. I feel like I'm jumping all over the place here, and I am. So, that fourth step for me, we have in Al-Anon what we call the 4 M's: managing, manipulating, martyrdom, mothering. To take those questions that I used to direct towards my husband, what's wrong with him? Why would he do that? Why would he say that? And for the first time, bringing those questions back to myself. Where was I managing? Where was I manipulating? Where was I mothering? Where was I playing the role of the martyr? Bringing those back to me. And it's not something that we do, to flog ourselves or to demean ourselves, but it's just so important, I have found. Unfortunately, I think we've turned the fourth step into an industry. That's just my opinion. But it's so important if I really do want any kind of emotional sobriety, that I'm willing to do a fearless and searching moral inventory, or I just simply will go, I just am not going to get anywhere. And to share that with another human being, with the God of my experience, to admit it to myself, that's a powerful move there. So I don't know, how am I doing here on time? I think that there was, for me, in doing a fourth and fifth step, a tremendous amount of forgiveness of self, but also a forgiveness of others, a forgiveness because it allowed me to see my part in things, my part in the situation. And once I could take an honest look at myself, I had great compassion for my husband. I had great compassion for my husband, the poor thing, having to live with someone like me, smug, arrogant, self-righteous. What a pain in the ass. But anyway, so I had made amends to him. I mean, by the time I really did make an amends to him, both living and verbal, a couple of years passed, and then he was killed. He was killed in a helicopter crash. But what I'd like to say is that I'm so grateful that before he died, I was able, in small ways, I mean, it wasn't like Jekyll and Hyde, but I was able in small ways to make a living and a verbal amends to him, and to be straight with that. But that then left me with these 7 little kids under the age of 14. And, again, Al-Anon, I think even more so than in my marriage, where Al-Anon really, principles of the program held me in good stead, was as a single parent. Because Well, because I live in a world where uh, it's funny. Well, it's funny. One of my adult children decided to get into therapy, and and she had only been a couple of sessions. And what happened was, what I knew what happened is that she was coming after me. That's all right. I mean, I was ready, because there seems to be, when kids screw up, the first person they go to, even more than the father, is the mother. What did your mother do to you? Anyhow, thank God I've done a fourth and fifth step, and very, made amends to kids when necessary. But how did I get on that? Oh, um, that's where Al-Anon just, helped me so much, because it allowed me to be okay with just being an okay mother. I didn't have to be like the super great, getting no sleep, making sure clothes were ironed. I just never felt like I had to do that. I took the kids to a grief counselor almost immediately after my husband was killed. They were horrible. I mean, they were just horrible in this office. They were just being so obnoxious. So the counselor threw them out. He threw them into the waiting room. And after we got rid of them, I said to him, I don't know that I'm going to be able to raise these kids by myself. And he said, "Oh, you won't. You're understaffed." What a wonderful thing for someone to say to me, "You're understaffed." Because what it did was it threw me right back into what I always knew, which was that I had to absolutely rely on a power greater than myself. And that's really been the beauty of, for the next 20 years of raising those kids by myself, is coming to terms with the idea. I mean, honestly, the program requires me, and probably some of you, maybe all of you, or many of you, it requires me to wrap myself in a cloak of humility. And that's what it requires of me if I'm really serious about my spiritual growth and my spiritual path. To absolutely understand what I can do and what I cannot do. And that came to me more in raising my kids than it did in my marriage, because my kids did get into trouble. Um, I often say, out of the 7 of them, 6 got arrested, and the one that didn't should have been. I mean, usually for minor things, some for not, but it required me. I mean, I had to get a job certainly after my husband was killed. I started teaching in this high school. Long story there, no time for it. But I would not constantly, but occasionally have to get a sub to come in so I could go to court with one of these kids. And when you're really working a solid spiritual program, you can do that without like being, "Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed." I really was never embarrassed. And I was never embarrassed because you taught me the importance of not looking outside of myself for validation, not looking outside of myself in order to be okay. What did I highlight here? Yeah, you're the ones that taught me the importance of cutting off these faulty emotional dependencies upon people or upon, any set of circumstances whatsoever. That was crucial and critical, and still is today, for me. What else did I see here that I loved so much? A degree of stability and quietness of mind. Yeah. But the other huge piece, of course, is, and it came from me, not only with 6 and 7, 8 and 9, of course, were important, but 10, 11, and 12. Those, I mean, that's where I live today. And I think I've been there primarily for a really, really long time, because this program tells me over and over again that the primary relationship in my life is my relationship with the God of my experience. And when I have that, when that relationship is solid, really everything else either falls into place or I discover that it's really not that important. Even with my kids, my role today with my kids, and my kids, some of them are going through some rough times, but it's through this spiritual program that I know that the most loving thing I can do for them, in addition to giving them a healthy parent, is to be a compassionate listener. There's an old saying, you prepare your children for the road. You don't prepare the road for your child and for your children. And that's, that's just an old way. It used to be an old way of thinking for me, is that idea that, I had to make the rough road smooth for my husband, for everybody. And I recognize now that I would be robbing them of their own spiritual path. I would be robbing them of the lessons that this world has to offer them. So I don't really want to go on too much longer. Well, let's see. What else could I say here? Al-Anon has taught me to trust in the slow work of God, that I truly believe in. This idea that the God of my understanding is awake, is aware. There's just, I get that really through practicing inventories. When I'm wrong, promptly admitting it, but certainly through prayer and meditation. When I was working full-time teaching, even though I was teaching in a Catholic school that allowed me to pray, start out the class with the prayer of St. Francis or the Serenity Prayer in its entirety, or take these kids on retreat, there was always a spiritual component to that, for which I was very, very grateful. But I could only do real prayer and meditation for maybe 10 to 15 minutes a day. And now, because in retirement, it's just, the time has just opened up, and I relish that time. It's just in order to keep me anchored, particularly in this world today, I just simply have to carve out of my day quality time, because without that, 12-step work would, it would be me trying to tell, boss people around, telling people what I think they needed to hear, instead of just reflecting back to people how these steps work in my life, and what has really become for me a tremendous amount of gratitude for what I've been given. And I think I'm just going to end there, Chris. That's kind of short, but I feel like I'm jumping all over the place. I don't want to get more. And I'd love to hear what you all have to say. So that's my story.
Thank you, Kathy.
Sure.
And whatever you want to share is perfect. And that certainly was very, very meaningful. Thank you.
Mhm.
We would love to hear from those that you want to hear from. So if there are 2 or 3 folks on this Zoom that you'd like to hear from, call them out, and then we'll open it up to everyone.
Really? Well, how about Deanna?
I'm Deanna. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi,
Thank you
Deanna.
so much for your share today. It couldn't have been better timing for me. God, I was taking notes. So I think one of the things that you said, that you were understaffed. I have been overwhelmed at work, and my sponsor just keeps telling me, you're understaffed. You don't have to do it all. And when you said that, it was like, oh my God, I'm hearing it again from a complete stranger on a meeting, that I'm understaffed. And so I thought that was great. So many good things. I wrote down the 4 M's, and the funny thing was I tried to remember them all, and the one I couldn't remember was managing. so I circled that one. We'll have to go back to that. And then of course, I think we all look to other people for validation, but I had kind of a win today. and that so I had a confrontation with an employee on a meeting with 7 other people, and I was proud of the fact that I didn't take it on, the stuff that he was saying. And normally I would take it on, and I would wonder, is he right? You know, am I wrong? What did I do wrong here? And I was actually able to walk away from that situation, and it hasn't been on my mind. It hasn't been, it didn't, he didn't get to me. And this is new for me, because I'm fairly new in this role, and a little insecure about my abilities in this job. And so to be able to really be confident and know that stand up for myself, and not take that kind of the way he talked to me, and to calmly address the situation and not overreact and overcorrect. And it was just not something I probably could have done 2 weeks ago, because I was so I have to do all of it. I have to take care of this. I have to be the perfect employee, be the perfect manager, all of those things that you were talking about. And I had this realization that, I was looking to my job for validation, and, was able to work on, I guess I was surrendered, is what you would call it. And, my focus was brought back to God. And because of that experience, because I was, I guess humbled a little bit. I wasn't looking for validation from this person, and was able to literally just pause and respond in a mature manner. And this is such growth for me. So I don't want to take up the whole meeting. Thank you so much for your share.
Yeah, thank you.
Any others, Kathy?
Well, what about Ray?
Is Ray on there?
Yeah, I see him. Well, you want me to call on somebody else?
Sure. If
How about Joel?
My name is Joel, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your whole qualification, and I'd like to have had, because I'm also a double winner. I'm also have Al-Anon issues, and I would love to have heard you. I'm sorry, a phone call came in and interrupted me listening. So I'll just listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. All right, what about Patty from Michigan?
I'm here. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really happy you called on me, because I'm really fairly new in the program. I've been in the program. I'm an Al-Anon, and I was really happy to hear your share. And my sponsor had recommended this meeting, and I just love that you talked about the family disease of alcoholism, and how that how it affects like every part of your being. And I'm going through the steps right now, and it was just really inspiring to hear you, and to hear what you were going through, and in your story. And I love to hear AA speakers as well. So that's what I love about this meeting, is you get a mixture of the experience, strength, and hope. And I'm 11 months in the program, so I'm very new, and I'll be a year next month, but I'm just so grateful to be here, and thanks for calling on me.
Thanks, Patty. All right. How about Rob?
Rob, willing to share?
Oh, no.
Is there anyone else? Kathy and Rob, of course, if you want
I
to
don't
share.
know.
Rob, feel free. I think I saw you put your camera on. Feel free to share if you'd like.
About that. My name is Rob. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Rob.
And Kathy, thank you very much for your share. Very enlightening how the two programs kind of intertwine around that good old demon booze. But thanks again, and that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. What about Olivia? No.
Olivia, are you willing to share? Kathy, we can open it up to
Yeah, why don't you open it up?
see who wants to share. And
Thank you.
before I do that, someone asked me a question early on in your share and asked, do you know what page number she read from the book Paths to Recovery? Did you
Yeah.
share the page number?
It's page number 29.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So if you'd like to share, put a digital hand up. It's a little easier for me to see. Then there we go. Kate, would love to hear from you.
Hello, I'm Kate. I'm an alcoholic.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. Kathy, I really enjoyed your share so much. I haven't made, I've gone to a few, I've been in AA for 28 years, but I've gone to a few Al-Anon, but haven't stuck with it. But anyway, I just admire what you've done with, I barely made it raising 2 kids and a stepson, you know, I mean, that just was, so it really helped me to hear just to be an okay mom,
Mhm.
you know, that because, you know, I wasn't the greatest mom, you know, I wasn't really, I never felt like I fit in with all the different groups of moms. You know, my girls were in dance and sports and all these different activities, and then the moms would all hang out, and I never fit in that thing. So you know, it's all right, and I can be okay with that today. But I like that you shared that, and I admire that you raised all those kids and taught, and you know, so sorry that your husband died in sound like a helicopter accident. I'm so sorry that you lost your husband, and you know, you've stayed in Al-Anon because it's for you. It sounds like what you're saying. You know, we don't go for the alcoholic, you know, we go for ourselves. But I had a question. I like that, addicted to approval too. I still sometimes see myself like, you know, hoping I get approval. But Thomas Merton, the beginning of love is, could you repeat the rest of that quote on the beginning of love is?
Well, it's from memory, but I believe it goes, the beginning of love is to allow those we love to be themselves perfectly.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to the meeting tonight and for sharing your experience, strength, and hope.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, thank you. Emerson, I think you're next on deck.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emerson, alcoholic. thank you so much, Kathy, for your lead. I really related to it. I really like one of the, in your opening, you talked about don't let perfection get in the way of the good. And I really related to that because I'm always, at least in my mind, trying, seeking some kind of perfection when I'm doing good. And that should be good enough. But the part that really got me, and this was something I literally experienced today, is seeking the approval of others, and not just seeking. It almost feels like sometimes I seek approval so much it feels like I'm a little kid banging on the door of the bathroom for mommy to come out. I mean, just like, it doesn't feel good. And I work in an emergency room with doctors and nurses, and I work kind of in the social work part of it. And I get along great with the doctors and nurses. We all do our jobs and collaborate and this and that. But there's this one nurse that doesn't like me. And I am like hyper focused on her, trying to figure out why in the F doesn't she like me? What have I done wrong? And I mean, I'll literally twist on that like so much of the day in my shift. And then I'll try and, the other day I came close to asking this other nurse that I get along with, like, has she ever like talked shit about me? I mean, what the issue? I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't, but it's really funny. It's not funny. It's a very uncomfortable feeling to ignore all of the good, all the other nurses and doctors, and be hyper focused on this one that I perceive doesn't like me. I don't even know that she doesn't like me. It just feels like it. So that was a very pertinent and powerful lesson for me today. And I also know that I don't have the power in and of myself to really change that. But I do know that, I know that there's a God. I've experienced God. I experience God on a daily basis. So that's something I'm going to take to prayer and just like, let's, I forget exactly how you put it, but it was a great saying, like, okay, let's see what God does with this. And I'll be fine with it. But yeah, seeking approval is, for me, is poisonous. And it feels poisonous. It feels like I lack power. It feels desperate. And I don't like that feeling. So you made that very clear. Thank you.
Thanks, Emerson.
Thank you. Juanita and Tom?
Well, Kathy, thank you so much.
Hey, Tom.
I have a friend in Denver, and he says, if it's odd, it's God. And I was actually going to text you today, and I didn't know you were speaking tonight. And then Sam Glenn is in Key West, and he texted me and he said, Kathy H is on tonight, so we tuned in, and I'm glad we did. And, a bunch of us, the last time you spoke on this deal, a bunch of us keyed into two things that you said. And one was the God of my experience, which I think is so important.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I don't know who that is, but, and the other thing was compassionate listening and not having to fix, and which can be hard. I mean, it can really be hard. And, so we've been talking about that, and that's kind of, that's come into my sharing in AA meetings and stuff, the God of my experience. The first time I heard that was Mark Houston said that he was, and I may have said this the last time you spoke, I repeat myself all the time, but Mark Houston said he was praying one morning, and in his prayer he said, God, please show me how to tell people about you. And then he went into meditation. He heard a voice say, don't tell them about me, tell them your experience of me. And, on page 46 in the big book, it says, none of us could fully comprehend nor define that power, which was God. And if that's true, then it can't be the God of my understanding. I mean, I know what they mean when they say that, but I don't understand God. but I have plenty of experience that I can tell people about. And it's such a, like a lot of people didn't pick up on that, but a lot of us did pick up on that when you spoke, and it meant an awful lot. And so why I was going to text you was 13 days ago, we're in Santa Fe, but we were in Nashville. We went up to Louisville to see Michael and Jessica up in Louisville and have lunch with them. And then on the way back, we did something I'd wanted to do for 30 years. We visited the Abbey of Gethsemane. And the two people that I thought of immediately upon being there were Mary Thayer and you. And I thought, that I was sure you had probably been there, but I thought, man, Mary Thayer would love this. And Juanita and I went in and into the chapel, and we meditated there. And we both had the exact same experience, that we nearly fell asleep. And the reason was not that we were so tired, but we felt so safe, surrounded by, I told somebody the serenity was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and what an experience that was. And I wanted to do that for 30 years. So I was going to tell you about that. And then yesterday, a guy came by here, and it was 32 years ago. I was his counselor in a treatment center. And we remained friends for a lot of years. And I actually sponsored him at one time. He's 60 years old and he's dying of lung cancer. And he basically came by he grew up in Taos and he lives in Arizona, and he had said goodbye to his parents, and he stopped here where we live to say goodbye to me. And, instead of being uptight or wanting to make him feel better, I just did that compassionate listening, and it really worked. And I thought about it the entire time, like, stay with your compassionate listening. Don't fix this guy. Listen to what he has to say, and then when you do talk, be honest. Don't walk on eggshells with him. And it worked out really, really well. So anyway, I was going to text you both of those things, and now I've told you. So thank you so much. You want to say something?
Thank you.
I'll say something quickly. Thank you, Kathy, so much. Yeah, I've been using, I think I texted you some time ago telling you that I gave you credit for a few times for that God of my experience. And then after a while, I was like, it's mine now. And that was just so fantastic, because I love it, because that's really what it amounts to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get the God of my understanding, is the God of my experience. And I have so many experiences of God in my life, and so I really am so thankful to you for that. It was beautiful. I just thank you. And I was up with my daughter in Albuquerque today, and you said so many things tonight. One of the things that really got me was this thing about we prepare our child for the road. We don't prepare the road for our child. Boy, I hear that. That is so beautiful. I love that. And the other thing was, I'm gonna state it this way because it's how I heard it the first time. You family members are thieves. You steal our experience. And how many times have I stolen someone's experience, not given them the respect to have their experience, but steal it and do something for them when they certainly could have done it. And that's one of the ways that I've seen myself cripple people, really. We talk about enabling, and that's one of the ways that, I've seen myself do that. And so I was up with my daughter today, and she's going through some stuff, and I failed compassionate listening. I just was like, I failed miserably. Well, that's not entirely true, I listened compassionately, and then it was like, well, honey, and I can't say I failed, because there's a time when we speak. There's a time for the mom to show up.
Right.
And with my daughter going through what she's going through, I said to Tom on the way back when I was driving back, I said, because he said he was expecting me home earlier, and I said, my daughter needed mama tonight. She needed mama today. And there is that time when we have to show up and we have to be mother, so isn't this whole program such a paradox? I mean, it's not black and white. There's all these shades of gray. And that to me is why this conscious contact with the God of my experience is so incredibly important, because I think I know. I think I know. And if I don't have that connection with that God of my experience, I don't know what's the right thing to do and the right thing to say. So I better be connected. I better spend that time in prayer and meditation and check in through the day to make sure that I'm being the person that God would have me have. Anyway, I love you with all my heart, and I just thank you for everything. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom and Winita. Rebecca, would love to hear from you.
Hi, Kathy. I'm Rebecca and I'm an alcoholic, and I just really wanted to say that I really appreciated everything that you just shared, especially the beginning of your share. I was supposed to be here this evening, and I was absolutely supposed to hear what you shared on. You defined in your share something that I'm going through, and I've not been here for very long, and you know, kind of entering into some of these growth periods and personal recognition, and you know, just recognizing that if I can change the outcome, if I can manage the outcome, I can live in peace. And you know, that's dangerous for me. It's dangerous ground for me. And I'm learning those pieces about myself. And you defined it so well for me. I heard it. And I really appreciate, I just really appreciate what you had to say. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing.
Thank you, Rebecca. Love to hear from some other folks. And I'm going to share, Kathy, a lot of what you said really struck a chord with me. I haven't shared much in this meeting in the year plus that I've been on here. And you talk about not needing approval of coming from within and from God. And I just want to say how sneaky my need for approval is. And I think I'm in a good spot. I think that I am in a good spiritual state. I'm maintaining my program, and it's my dependence slips in without warning and without awareness. And I think what happens is my subconscious says, okay, God, thanks, I've got it from here. Next thing you know, I am back kind of trying to run the show, and it happens day to day. And I think that usually by Thursday is when I've done my best and am failing my worst. By Thursday, I need this message the most in the week, and tonight included. When I came here tonight, there's just so many things that I became aware of as you shared. One is, you know, I think my well-being is like the stock market. They say, you know, don't pay too much attention to the stock market because it always goes up and down. But my well-being is dependent upon if I have plans with people, if I have invitations from people, if people are, you know, complimenting me. And recently I've gotten a whole bunch of invitations for things work-wise and other parts of my life. And I have felt, okay, I'm in good shape because look, I haven't heard from her and she wants me to do something. And this person has asked me to, you know, do this music thing. And this person has asked me to do this. And what often happens with me is sometimes I won't even respond to them and I'll blow the opportunity, because for me, it's really not about doing the things. It's about you needing me to do the things. And so as long as the people from the various connections in my life need me and want me, like, you know, my stock is high. And then all of a sudden, when I'm not needed in that way, like this weekend, my wife and kids are going out of town to visit extended family. And so for our holiday weekend, I have to stay here for work. And so I'm going to be all alone. I'm exhausted. I need rest. And I'm thinking about the weekend, feeling extraordinarily depressed because no one needs me, right? No one has invited me to anything, no picnics, no plans. And as you were talking, and I was just getting in touch with this, that feeling of low self-worth and low self-esteem, I realized that it's so darn sneaky, that sort of self-reliance, but also really reliance on what other people think. And I thought I was doing well. I wasn't even aware of how quickly and how strongly that dependence on other people slips back in. Henry Nouwen, you may be aware, and I think it might have been shared here before, but Henry Nouwen wrote, "I am not what I do, I'm not what I have, and I'm not what other people think of me." And I can say that and share that, but in a matter of 24 hours, I will default to my original operating system in which I am what I have, what I do, and whether people think of me. And so that's so important. I need this meeting. I mean, I need the program in general, but this meeting particularly, and hearing this letter week after week just keeps reminding me that my need for your approval and your affection and your need is sneaky, and I don't even realize it's taken back over. And that's why this program is so important. So that's all I've got. Thanks for listening. And Kathy, thank you for your share tonight.
Thanks, Chris.
Abigail, would love to hear from you. You're muted, Abigail. Abigail, would you like to share?
I don't think her audio is connected.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Would anyone else like to share? Is that Trip? Yeah, we'd love to hear from you, Trip.
Hey, thank you so much, Kathy. That was amazing.
Sure.
I really connected. I just kind of came through a lot of stuff, and it's amazing. You know, I thought I was handling a lot of the stuff, but with the accumulation of, you know, alcoholism, drug addiction, I thought it was my job from the age of 5 years old to save my grandfather. Then it was my uncles and my mother, and then it was my siblings. And, you know, I had the same thought when I got sober and my kids were 1 and 3. And I remember thinking, like, I'm going to be dealing with this for the rest of my life. And I was, until I wasn't willing to. And that was it was very hard for me. I've been sober for a long time. I've done Al-Anon, not consistently. But I definitely have had my stretches. And that was the hardest thing, was to let my kids go through their experience. And I tell people, I said, you know, when I finally got that I was triggering the shit out of my son, pardon my language, it took me 6 months for him to even look at me. And then it took another 5 months until he would actually have a conversation with me. And so that was a test for me, but that's what kind of got me through. Like, I cannot mess with anybody else's experience. And so that's it was very reassuring to hear you say that. Thank you so much. Grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trip. And Joanne?
I'm Joanna. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Kathy, for your share. I really appreciated you here emphasizing that we need to develop some self-love and self-caring. To me, it's a very important piece of my recovery that we need to develop a different relationship with ourselves, one of friendliness and support rather than judgment and criticism, and a little bit of curiosity and interest rather than judgment again. Now, you said you read from page 29. I can't find it in the book. Is it on the top of the page, in the middle of the page? And also the 4 M's. I remember martyrdom, manipulation, mothering, and what's the 4th one?
Managing.
Managing. Oh, yes.
You know, it could be that you have a different edition that I do, but on my Paths to Recovery book, it's on page 29. It's contained in the chapter on step 3.
Yeah, I know it's in step 3, but I can't find it. I've looked through the whole chapter and I looked on page 29 and it's not there.
It's at the, well, in my book, it's at the very top of page 29.
No. Well, actually, wait a second. It might, but I think it starts on page 28 for me.
Okay, yeah, I have an old book.
Okay, thank you.
Sure,
So,
thank you.
anyways, I'm both an alcoholic and I'd also belong to Al-Anon, so I have both literatures. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Irina, would you like to share? We'd love to hear from you. You're muted, if you wouldn't mind unmuting. There you go.
Thank you. I'm a little shy about sharing. Kathy, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for so much. I love that phrase of the God of my experience. Like others, I think I will be stealing that. You touched me in many ways. One of the things we're working on now is principles inventory, looking back at what it is that are guiding principles in our lives. And certainly at the top of mine is what will people think? This was my mother's constant refrain. What will people say? What will people think? And even now it's there. It's like, I'd like to share, but what will people think? Anyway, so thank you for letting me know that I'm not alone in that. As being, they're making me conscious just how prevalent it is. The other thing that really touched me was your story about wanting to keep things hidden, wanting no one to know what's going on in your life. My husband was paranoid schizophrenic. He was also a professor. So we really had to keep this, or felt that we had to keep this a very deep secret, that his delusions and his behavior wasn't outrageous, but his delusions were fairly intense. And I took him to so many psychiatrists and no one seemed to have a solution. This was before I knew how powerless I was. I was going to fix him. I was going to find a way to fix him and make him okay. And that, of course, didn't work. But I appreciate the secrecy with which you lived, with trying to put forth a front and hide all of this stuff behind it that's really going on in your life. So thank you for openly sharing about that. It was a great share. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you,
Irina. We're at the end of our time, just before 10 o'clock. Kathy, is there anything that you'd like to share or just kind of wrap up in your thoughts before we close?
Actually, no, I really had thought about something. I forget what it was. But I like the idea of, yeah, well, I sometimes I tell the story. I didn't say anything today, but as I was listening to everybody sharing, which of course, I'm taking in is helping me as well. A dear friend of mine was trained as a 911 operator. And as part of her training, she was taught that if someone is involved in a horrific accident, what is important for the 911 operator is to assure that person that help is on the way, that they're going to be okay. Hang in there. Help is on the way. You're going to make it. You're going to be fine. And when she was telling me about her training, I thought that's so much, that's so reflective of the programs of recovery, is that we come together. Alcoholism led me into isolation. Recovery brings me into community. And it's into a community with men and women who are saying to me in so many ways, by their, the grace of who they are, you're going to be okay. Help us here. We're going to do this together. You're enough for today. So that's all I want to say, Chris. But again, thank you very much for allowing me to come and to share.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Your sharing it felt very healing. I think not just for me, but for a lot of us here, a balm. So as we close our time, the way that we do it is we just take a moment of silence to give us space to say a prayer of our choice. And then we'll get to come back and unmute ourselves and say thanks to Kathy. So let's just center ourselves and offer a prayer silently in our inner room.